Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today's lecture, that is lecture number 5, is about the regulation of heart pumping. After studying this lecture, the student will be able to explain the role of key players in the regulation of heart pumping, that is intrinsic regulation and the role of autonomic nervous system. In addition to key players, the student will also be able to mention the role of associated factors like electrolyte balance, temperature, and arterial pressure. First, we will discuss the role of key players in the regulation of heart pumping. And the first key factor is intrinsic regulation, that is also called Frank-Starling mechanism. Basically, the amount of blood pumped by the heart each minute is normally determined almost entirely by the rate of blood flow into the heart from the veins, which is called venous return. That is, each peripheral tissue of the body controls its own local blood flow, and all the tissue flows combine and return by way of veins to the right atrium. The heart, in turn, automatically pumps this incoming blood so that it can again flow through the circuit. This intrinsic ability of the heart to pump all the blood that enters into it is called the Frank-Starling mechanism of the heart, or you can say the intrinsic regulation of heart pumping. This mechanism explains that greater the heart muscle is stretched during filling, the greater is the force of contraction and greater will be the quantity of blood pumped into the aorta. This quantity of blood pumped into aorta in each beat is called stroke volume, as mentioned in the lecture number 1 and 2. And this quantity of blood pumped into the aorta each minute is called cardiac output. There is limitation, there is physiological explanation of this mechanism that when extra amount of blood enters the heart during diastole, this results in greater stretching of the cardiac muscle, especially we can say the ventricular muscle if we talk more specifically. This produces lengthening of the ventricular muscle, and this stretching leads to contraction with increased force because actin and myosin are brought to more nearly optimal degree of overlap for force generation. This leads to the ventricular muscle to pumps extra blood into the arteries, means this increases cardiac output. There is limitation to this mechanism, that this mechanism occurs only up to optimal length, means within physiological limits heart pumps all the blood that returns to it by way of veins. This intrinsic regulation of the heart can be explained with the help of right and left ventricular function curves. The data presented in these curves of left ventricle and right ventricle are recorded from dogs and shows ventricular stroke work output as a function of left mean atrial pressure and right mean atrial pressures. These graphs shows that as the atrial pressure increases from 0 towards higher values, the stroke volume output for each side, means for the left and the right ventricular stroke work, also increases. This can also be explained further with the help of these two curves of ventricular function curves. As the right and left atrial pressure increases, the respective ventricular volume outputs per minute also increases, means for the right ventricle and for the left ventricle these pressures also increases. The ventricular function curves are another way of expressing the Frank-Starling mechanism of the heart. That is, as the ventricles fills in response to higher atrial pressures, each ventricular volume and strength of cardiac muscle contraction increase, causing the heart to pump greater quantities of blood into the arteries. Next is the second key player that is autonomic nervous system. There are two divisions of the autonomic nervous system that are sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. The pumping effectiveness of the whole heart, while is controlled by both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. The parasympathetic nerves comes through vagal nerves to the heart, while the sympathetic nerve supply comes from the sympathetic chain through the sympathetic nerves to the heart. The amount of blood pumped each minute that we defined as cardiac output can be increased more than 100% after sympathetic stimulation. By contrast, the output from the heart, it can be reduced to very low levels by vagal stimulation. First, we will discuss the role of sympathetic nerves on the heart. The sympathetic nerves, they continuously discharge at a slow rate, and this discharge at a slow rate maintains pumping ability of the heart at 30% above normal. It means that the heart pumps 30% more cardiac output when we consider that the sympathetic stimulation is zero. And when we consider that the sympathetic stimulation is zero, the value of cardiac output is 12 to 13 liters per minute. So at this point, when we say there is zero sympathetic stimulation, means this is under experimental conditions, means the heart pumping totally then depends upon the intrinsic mechanisms, means it depends upon the venous return. When there is normal sympathetic stimulation, the cardiac output increases 30%. When it increases 30%, it becomes 14 liters per minute after normal sympathetic stimulation. When there is no sympathetic stimulation, this 30% increase basically decreases in the cardiac output value. The sympathetic stimulation produces two effects. Number one, it increases heart rate, and it increases heart rate from 72 beats per minute to 200 beats per minute. The strong sympathetic stimulation also increases force of contraction twice normal to normal sympathetic stimulation. Together, increase in heart rate and increase in force of contraction can produces 2 to 3-fold increase in cardiac output. After strong sympathetic stimulation As we mentioned that there occurs 2 to 3 folds more increase in cardiac output, so the cardiac output becomes 23 to 24 liters per minute after strong sympathetic stimulation. When there is sympathetic inhibition, basically the heart rate decreases and also force of contraction decreases, and this produces again 30% decrease in cardiac output than the normal value. The role of parasympathetic nerves is opposite to the sympathetic stimulation, means that parasympathetic stimulation decreases heart rate and also decreases cardiac output. The parasympathetic stimulation reduces heart rate. So the heart rate decrease in heart rate depends upon the parasympathetic stimulation. If parasympathetic stimulation is strong, then it can stop the heartbeat. If it stops the heartbeat, then what happens? This is big question. When the heart stops beating after strong sympathetic stimulation, then the heart usually escapes. When the heart escapes, then the heart beats at a rate of 30 to 40 beats per minute. Because the vagal fibers are distributed mainly to the atria and not much to the ventricles, where the power contraction of the heart occurs. Where the power contraction of the heart occurs. The parasympathetic stimulation effect on strength of contraction as compared to heart rate is less, as we have explained that the parasympathetic stimulation is only to the atria and very few fibers they innervate the ventricles. So the decrease in force of contraction is only 20 to 30%. So together heart rate and decrease in strength of contraction produces 50% decrease in the ventricular pumping capability of the heart, and it can be seen from this graph that the parasympathetic stimulation decreases cardiac decreases cardiac output. The summary of autonomic effect is that at any given right atrial pressure, the cardiac output increases with sympathetic stimulation, while the cardiac output decreases with parasympathetic stimulation. These four curves represent function of the entire heart rather than of single ventricle. They show the relation between the right atrial pressure at the input of the right heart and the cardiac output from the left ventricle into the aorta. These changes in output caused by autonomic nervous system results both from changes in the heart rate, number one, and they also result from the changes in the force of contraction. Next is the role of associated factors like the role of electrolytes. Regarding the role of electrolytes, we will focus on the potassium and calcium ions. The potassium is the most abundant intracellular cation, and about 98% of the body's potassium is found inside the cells, with the remainder in the extracellular fluid, including the blood. Membrane potential is maintained principally by the concentration gradient and membrane permeability to potassium, with some contribution from the sodium potassium ATPase. The potassium gradient is critically important for many physiological processes, including maintenance of cellular membrane potential, homeostasis of cell volume, and transmission of action potentials. When the level of potassium increases, this condition is called hyperkalemia, and the level of potassium increases means the level of potassium increases in the extracellular fluid. When the level of potassium increases in the extracellular fluid, it basically partially depolarizes the cell membrane. When it partially depolarizes the cell membrane, the nerve generates an action potential by itself. What is the reason of this? The reason of this is that when the potassium level increases in the body, the resting membrane potential in cardiac muscle cells, it becomes less negative. It becomes less negative, means it remains near threshold point. As we have mentioned in the previous lectures, that the phase 1 of ventricular muscle action potential is due to sodium influx. So when sodium influx occurs, the stage 1 becomes completed, and after that the sodium channels, they close. When sodium channels close means they become inactivated. When they become inactivated, for generation of new action potential in the ventricular muscle, the sodium channels basically they must recover from inactivation. They must recover from inactivation. So the hyperkalemia opens some sodium channels but also increases the inactivation at the same time. Since depolarization due to concentration change is slow, since Depolarization of the cardiac muscle membrane is slow due to partial recovery of sodium channels. When this happens, instead of producing new action potential, these changes results in accommodation and cell becomes refractory. Means that the slowly rising stimulus fails to excite the cardiac muscle cells and it becomes refractory, means that the cells do not recover from the inactivation phase, and when they do not recover from the inactivation state and the cells becomes refractory, this leads to dilatation and flaccidity of the cardiac muscle. At the same time, the heart rate also becomes slow. When heart rate becomes slow and the cardiac muscle, it becomes dilated and flaccid. This leads to number one, severe weakness of the heart that leads to decrease in force of contraction. This also leads to abnormal rhythm. This also leads to abnormal rhythm, and if hyperkalemia persists in the body and it is not corrected, it may lead to death. Hypokalemia means low potassium levels in the extracellular fluid. The low potassium levels in the extracellular fluid leads to hyperpolarization of resting membrane potential, means resting membrane potential becomes more negative. It becomes more negative. And when the resting membrane potential becomes more negative, this delays ventricular repolarization. As a result, a greater than normal stimulus is required for depolarization of the membrane to initiate action potential. So, greater than normal stimulus is required to initiate the action potential. Due to this delay in initiation of action potential occurs, and this delayed repolarization may promote arrhythmias, especially re-entrant type of arrhythmias that we will discuss in the arrhythmias when we will study the arrhythmias. The next is the role of calcium ions. As we have discussed in the previous lectures, that the calcium is mandatory to initiate the cardiac contractile process. If there occurs excess of calcium ions in the body, then the heart moves towards the spastic contractions. This effect is caused by the direct action of calcium ions to initiate the cardiac contractile process, and this effect produces spastic contractions. So when there is deficiency of the calcium ions in the body, the heart becomes weak and the cardiac weakness occurs. Fortunately, the calcium levels in the blood regular normally are regulated within very narrow range. So, therefore, cardiac effects of abnormal calcium concentrations are of seldom clinical concern. So the summary is that the increase in the calcium leads to spastic contractions. The deficiency of calcium ions leads to cardiac weakness. Figure shows that increasing the arterial pressure in aorta does not decrease the cardiac output, does not decrease the cardiac output until the mean arterial pressure rises above 160 millimeter of mercury. That is the normal physiological range. After 160 millimeter of mercury, the increase in the arterial pressure basically leads to decrease in the cardiac output. The reason of this effect is that during normal function of the heart at normal systolic arterial pressure between 80 to 140 millimeter of mercury, the cardiac output is determined entirely by the ease of blood flow through the body's tissues, which in turn controls venous return of blood to the heart. So the summary is that with increase in arterial pressure beyond physiological limits leads to decrease in the cardiac output. With this, we finish this lecture. In the next lecture, we will start the conduction system of the heart. Thank you very much, dear students.